Good morning, and thank you all for joining us today, both those in this room and then those that are watching online, the Center for Advancing the Ideal of the American Dream. When I think of how to introduce Kristalina, it's very hard to figure out what are the qualities you need to lead the IMF. How do you prepare for this job in your life? Well, let's just take a look at that. What kind of life shapes a person for that awesome responsibility, the task of helping nations navigate global crisis, pandemics, expanding opportunity for billions of people on this planet, 191 countries that are part of the IMF. So in looking at that background, if you ever think one day, maybe I could run the IMF, let's look at this young girl's background. It starts in Bulgaria, where she earned her PhD in economics. She began as a university professor, teaching students about those levers that drive growth and allowing human beings to flourish. She took those ideas into practice and joined the World Bank as an economist, where she would rise through the ranks over 2 decades. She went on to the European Commission, so it's not enough to work for the World Bank, guiding the EU's response to the debt, refugee crisis, overseeing a budget of more than 150 billion euros and 33,000 people. She then returned to the World Bank, this time as its interim CEO. But that was all before taking on the world's most demanding economic position, Managing Director of the IMF. Since 2019, Kristalina has successfully navigated the fund through some of the most troubled years in recent history. A pandemic, wars, inflation, debt distress, and global uncertainty. It's an awesome responsibility for this young girl from Bulgaria to take on, but decades and decades of commitment and experience have paid off. It's not enough just to stabilize economics and societies, but to sustain confidence that people everywhere can improve their life through work, learning, and enterprise. And so, in a sense, the IMF is not a financial institution. It is a guardian of global conditions that make the ideal of this dream of upward mobility, referred to as the American dream, a possibility all around the world. So we are thrilled that she chose the Center for Advancing the American Dream for this important speech. And we are all lucky that in these times of uncertainty, that this young girl from Bulgaria is leading us and leading the IMF. Please join me in welcoming the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Mike, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. That was a very kind introduction. But above all, thank you for allowing me and the IMF to be part of the opening of this fabulous center. I cannot think of a better place to talk about the pursuit of opportunity than right here in the Hall of Dreams. As I look at the world over the decades, what I see is incredible progress, but also unfulfilled dreams. The average person today is much better than the one 30 years ago, but the averages conceal deep undercurrents of marginalization, discontent, and hardship. My former professor of statistics used to say about averages, you can put your head in the fridge, your feet in the oven, your average temperature, would be average, but you will be dead. And what we see is many people in many places, especially the young, are taking their disappointment to the streets, from Lima to Rabat, from Paris to Nairobi, from Kathmandu to Jakarta. All are demanding better opportunity. Here in the US, chances of growing up to earn more than your parents keep falling. And here, too, discontent has been evident, and it has helped precipitate the policy revolution that is now unfolding, reshaping trade, immigration, and many international frameworks. All of this plays out against a backdrop of deep transformation in geopolitics, in technology, in demographics, with populations surging in some places and shrinking in others, and in the mounting harm we do to our planet. What is the result? Exceptionally high uncertainty. Globally, it has shot up and continues to climb. Buckle up. Uncertainty is the new normal. It is here to stay. As we know, next week the world's finance ministers and central bank governors would gather at our annual meeting. Wonderful to see one of our former governors, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, here. Thank you for joining us today. As you know, this would be a time of very intense engagements, and the most pressing questions will be about the global economic impact of these forces of transformation and the policy turbulence we are experiencing today. So, how is the world economy coping? Short answer: better than feared, but worse than we need. When we met in April, many experts, not us, predicted a US recession in the near term with negative spillovers to the rest of the world. Instead, the US economy, as well as many other advanced and emerging markets and some developing countries, have held up. As our World Economic Outlook will explain next week, we see global growth slowing only slightly this year and next. All signs point to a world economy that has generally withstood acute strains from multiple shocks. So, how do we explain this resilience? What made it possible? I would point to 4 reasons. 1, improved policy fundamentals. 2, private sector adaptability. 3, less severe tariff outcomes than initially feared, for now. And 4, supportive financial conditions for as long as they hold. Let me elaborate. First reason, better policy fundamentals, and global coordination. In many parts of the world, sustained efforts have delivered more credible monetary policy, deeper local currency bond markets, new fiscal rules, and during the pandemic, and actually Secretary Mnuchin was part of it, swift, decisive, and globally coordinated fiscal action to limit the immediate pain and the lasting scars. Emerging market economies, in particular, have significantly upgraded their policy frameworks and institutions. We just put out a report on progress they have made, quantifying the gains. These economies now perform better when shocks strike than before the global financial crisis. Good policy makes a difference. Second reason for resilience, private sector adaptability. And again, we have seen the public sector moving out from where it doesn't belong, from the economy, the private sector stepping forward, and that is benefiting the world at a time of more turbulence. Just look at private initiative in world trade. Companies have been front-loading import orders in advance of tariff hikes and reorganizing rapidly their supply chains. Corporate balance sheets are generally strong after years of robust profit. Reflexes are quick after the dry runs of shock after shock. Artificial intelligence is becoming mainstream. Anybody in this audience using ChatGPT? Raise a hand. Okay, mainstream. And change is faced as a challenge, but also embraced as an opportunity. Third reason, tariffs, where the shock has not been as large as initially announced. The US trade-weighted tariff rate has fallen from 23% in April to 17.5% now. This is still much higher than it was before. The US effective rate, we calculate that it is around 9 to 10%. In other words, what is collected as tariffs is far above the rest of the world. But the world has been relatively steady this year with very few cases of retaliation. In short, the world has avoided a tit-for-tat slide into a trade war for now. But openness has nonetheless taken a big hit, and the story is not over. US tariff rates keep moving. Trade deals with the UK, the EU, Japan, soon Korea, they have nudged some rates down, while disputes with Brazil and India have pushed others up. And other countries' rates also are likely to move somewhat more. But bottom line here is better than we feared. For reasons: supportive financial conditions. Fired up by optimism about the productivity-enhancing potential of AI, global equity prices are surging. This plus tight risk spreads leaves funding markets generally wide open. And in addition, the dollar's slide earlier this year gives precious relief to non-US borrowers with dollar-denominated debt. So here we have it, 4 factors behind the economic resilience we have seen this year. But before anyone heaves a big sign of relief, please hear this. Global resilience has not yet been fully tested. And there are some worrying signs the test may come. Just look at the surging global demand for gold. Spurred by valuation effects and net purchases, partly reflecting geopolitical factors, holdings of monetary gold now exceed 1/5 of the world's official reserves. On tariffs, the full effect is still to unfold. In the US, margin compression could give way to more price pass-through, raising inflation, with implications for monetary policy and for growth. Elsewhere, a flood of goods previously destined for the US market could trigger a second round of tariff hikes. Yes, world trade is rippling, but still flowing. Like water, it is not easy to pluck and stop. For now, most of the world's trade still follows the rules. We at the IMF are urging the world's policymakers, please keep it this way. Please preserve trade as an engine of growth. As for easy financial conditions, which are masking but not arresting some softening trends, including in job creation, history tells us this sentiment can turn on the dime. Today's valuations are heading towards levels we saw during the bullishness about the internet 25 years ago. If a sharp correction were to occur, tighter financial conditions could drag down world growth, expose vulnerabilities, and make life especially tough for developing countries. So in a multipolar world of rapid change, it is paramount that policymakers do much more to capture and deliver opportunity so they can meet the aspirations of their citizens, especially young people. So how could they do that? At the IMF, we propose 3 medium-term policy goals. First, to durably lift growth, so the economy creates more jobs, more public revenue, better public and private debt sustainability. Second, to repair government finances, so they can buffer new shocks and attend to the pressing needs without driving private sector borrowing rates up. And 3, to address excessive imbalances, both domestic and external, so they do not emerge as a spoiler. Let me take you through those 3 one by one. First, growth. Many of you have heard me talking about it. Global growth forecast at around 3% over the medium term, way below the pre-pandemic 3.7% level. Global growth patterns have been changing over the years, notably with China decelerating steadily, while India is turning into a key growth engine. Durably lifting growth requires, above all, higher private sector productivity. And for this, governments must provide and protect the basic building blocks of free markets, including property rights, rule of law, good data, effective bankruptcy codes, strong financial sector oversight, and independent yet accountable institutions. In too many economies, private sector productivity is tangled up in red tape, and startups can neither start nor grow. Competition, of course, is key, and regulation must not tolerate or create unfair advantage. So, today, I call on our member countries to embrace a regulatory house cleaning to release entrepreneurship energy, supported by strong institutions and governance. This is not a time for self-inflicted injuries. This is a time to get the house in order. To Asia, I say, deepen internal trade to include more final goods and more services, and press forward with reforms to strengthen the service sector and access to finance. Our analysis suggests that a push for more regional integration, notably by lowering non-tariff barriers, could raise GDP by 1.8% in the long run. To sub-Saharan Africa, I see the Kenyan ambassador here. Gains from reforms in this region can be especially large given the young and growing labor force. Comprehensive business-friendly reforms combined with progress in advancing the continental free trade area, they could lift the real GDP per capita in a median African country by 10%. And to my beloved native Europe, some tough love. Enough lofty rhetoric of how to lift competitiveness. You know what must be done. So do it. Consider appointing a single market czar with real authority to drive reforms forward. Remove border frictions in the labor market, goods and services, trade in energy and finance. Build a single European financial system. For God's sake, get the Capital Markets Union to work for you. Build an energy union. Complete your project and catch up with the private sector dynamism of the United States. A picture can say 1,000 words. Here, what you see is how 7 US mega firms, none of which existed 51 years ago, boast market capitalization in the United States. United States? In the United States, right there. So look at the picture here and on picture there. They dwarf the firms of similar vintage in Europe. This has to change. Let me now turn to fiscal affairs, starting with the sobering reality that global public debt is projected to exceed 100% of GDP by 2029. And this is led by advanced and emerging market economies. Rising debt inflates interest payments, exerts upward pressure on borrowing costs, constrains other spending, and reduces government's ability to cushion against shocks. And one of the most dramatic casualties in advanced economies is that development assistance to the world's neediest countries has been regrettably on a decline. And what it means for low-income countries on the receiving end of this trend is more self-help, including setting a minimum tax to GDP target of 15%. I mean, frankly, you cannot have a functioning economy if your tax to GDP is 9%, 10%, 11%. We also have to advocate for fiscal consolidation as a necessity in countries rich and poor alike. And yeah, consolidation is difficult, as many of the recent episodes of social unrest show. But if it is planned, communicated, and implemented well, significant deficit reduction can be delivered, especially if it is helped by higher medium-term growth. And that's our hope, grow your economy out of trouble. With that, let me now turn to the third task, reducing resurgent current account imbalances. As we have seen, these imbalances can trigger a protectionist backlash, and being mirrored by net capital flows, they can fuel financial stability risks. At the IMF, we are working hard to refine our external sector assessments, and we will keep pushing key players for policy corrections. To the US, where both private consumption and the fiscal deficit are high, and the current account deficit is at levels not seen since the early 2000s, we will urge action along two broad dimensions. First, steps to address the federal government deficit, noting that the federal debt to GDP ratio is on a path to exceed its all-time high after World War II. We need sustained action that goes beyond discretionary spending. Second, steps to incentivize household savings, where consideration should be given, for instance, to expanding existing plans that provide favorable tax treatment for retirement savings, among other possible tax policy adjustments. To China, where private savings are chronically high and domestic demand is held back by protracted real estate adjustment and deflationary pressures, we urge transitional fiscal expansion and permanent fiscal recomposition. China needs a fiscal structural package to boost private consumption, transition to a new growth model, and reflate its economy, which will also help counter the recent depreciation of its real exchange rate, which pulls against rebalancing. This gives me time to breathe. Here is the exchange rate. Among other items, China's package should include more spending on social safety nets and property sector cleanup, and much less on industrial policy, where a new IMF paper estimates the cost at high level 4.4% of GDP per year. As for Germany, its recent structural shift to a more expansive fiscal policy, which should help bring down the current account surplus, shows that yes, corrections can be made. Bravo to Germany. Public spending on infrastructure, pushed up by providing incentives for private investment at home, will be especially beneficial as Germany seeks to inject new dynamism into its private sector. And yes, the country needs it and can benefit from it. So as I close, let me go back to youth aspirations. Mike, it is with a sense of deep responsibility that I lead an institution where our basic duty is to influence policies in a way that maximizes economic opportunity for all people. So today my parting words are this. If we all pull together in this complex and uncertain world. We can deliver good policies that underpin free markets with smart regulations, strong institutions, reliable data, and robust safety nets. Policies with the power to further increase resilience and accelerate growth. I will finish with words I read on the wall in this room. A dream you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together is reality. So let's get it done and deliver opportunity in this time of change. Thank you. No, that's for me.
Kristalina, for a few of us, we have just finished a period of reflection in a new year. And in that reflection, they point out, we have given you, I'm paraphrasing, a good road map for Sake at Night. And when I think of your speech here today, how inspiring and what a great roadmap it is for all of us to figure out what our activities are going to be. In your speech, you said that the global economy was doing, quote, better than feared, but worse than needed. You highlighted the important role of the private sector, particularly entrepreneurship. Can you kind of unpack that for us? How do you see the role of the private sector to get the global economy going again? What is your call to action? What should we be doing?
Thank you. Again, many thanks for hosting us here, Mike. When we step back to April, when we had our spring meetings and all the governors of the IMF and the World Bank, ministers of finance, central bank governors were here very anxious. Why? Because of very high uncertainty. At that time, the fear of downward adjustment was overwhelming. I remember defending, we at the fund were saying, wait a minute, it's not that bad. I mean, yes, we have uncertainty, but we also have all these strengths in the economy. And I spent in virtually every interview defending that the fund is not projecting a recession. And when I look forward from that moment, to me, the main reason we are more resilient is because good policy fundamentals underpin private sector adaptability. If we were still in a world with very big share of the public sector in the economy, as it used to be in the Gulf, as it used to be in my part of the world, that adaptability would have been missing. So my first message to everybody in this audience is, at a time of very high uncertainty, you need agility and adaptability, and the private sector is so much more capable of delivering it. Of course, it doesn't mean that the private sector would always get it right, and this is why having good data to give a sense of where we are headed, good institutions that can be there to make sure that there is a level playing field and that there is predictability of what regulations would look like. This all matters tremendously. But if I'm to go back to my personal history, and you mentioned I was born in Bulgaria, I grew up in a non-market economy, I can tell everybody here, doesn't work, ain't gonna work, to have center decision making and a oversized public sector role. So what do we want for the private sector? Three things. One, clarity in the regulatory environment, not too much, not too little. Two, access to finance, and this is where the whole story of governments bringing down deficits matters so much, because if they don't do it, they're pushing up interest rates up for the private sector included. And three, we need the ability of small companies to grow. And in far too many places, if you are a small company, you're stuck between the big guys. And in so many places, failure is not treated kindly. The United States has the advantage of saying, hey, you know, I fell off the cliff, I dust myself up, I go again. But in many, many places, the laws do not clean the economy from that wood. So companies start, fail, and then they're stuck. So there is a lot. Actually, when I talk about regulatory house cleaning, I mean it. There is a lot we need to do to create this enabling environment. Why? Because uncertainty is here to stay, and we need the agility of the private sector to bolster growth prospects.
So you mentioned something. Many of the stories, of the 1,000 stories that you can see in the center, of the uniqueness of why they came to the United States was they had a chance, a second chance, a third chance. And as we look at the leading technology companies today in the world, most of their leaders had a failure before they had success. And I think that really underlines, and as we step back and look at, if we look at the United States, as you just pointed out, there were more than 50 million jobs created by small and medium businesses in the last 30 years of the 20th century, and minus 4 million jobs by large companies. So I think you've stressed this importance of entrepreneurism. We're sitting here today, you and I, in this building, across from the White House and the Treasury. Both have been quite active in pushing their agendas, as we all know. We've seen new tariffs, tax incentives, shift in trade alliances, all while deficits and debt are rising. Can this mix support long-term growth? And you've already told us no. Where do we go from here?
Look, I mean, it is... there is a beautiful saying that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So let's eat some more, and then we can answer this question. What I see in the United States is a recognition that the world we had before has become unsustainable. For many reasons, and we can argue, are they right reasons, are they wrong reasons? But what is happening is not a capricious move. It is a response to the fact that far too many people felt disfranchised. Is the way this is being addressed the right one? Let's collect more data, and we actually are going to have an in-depth engagement with US authorities towards the end of this year. We will talk more about what works, what we think can be done differently. I want to zero in on one issue where I don't think there is disagreement, and this is the issue of the size of the deficit. I don't think there are many people who would stand up and say, hey, large deficit is beautiful, let's have more of it. So the question is, how do we deal with it? Because it is a very important signal, including to the private sector, that there is a path to reduce the deficit. What are the ways to do it? One, grow more. At this point, we have seen a very resilient growth story in the United States. Would it hold? And there we are looking at the incoming data. There may be some softening. The very fact that the Federal Reserve decided to cut interest rates in the balance between inflation and growth shows that there is that softening. So more to generate impetus for growth, certainly important. Two, look at the balance of revenues and expenditures with a rational rather than emotional eye. And there I think we all could see, I talked about one aspect of tax policy that could be steps to be taken. But the third step is the most important and the most difficult one. Carry people with you. Get people to understand that ballooning deficit and more public spending, not necessarily good for them. And that is where I see it across, not just in the United States, everywhere. We still haven't figured out how to do that, how to bring people with us on things that are tough. In my part of the world, in Central and Eastern Europe, we have had examples of brave leaders doing very difficult stuff, cutting pensions and wages by 40–50% and being re-elected. Why? Because they carried people with them. There is confidence that needed to be done. We now look at Argentina. Argentina is taking a very dramatic adjustment program forward. The success is going to be based on carrying people with you. So I hope that if they are American, are there Americans in the audience? I mean, we are an international community, but I hope they are. I hope that you guys are taking this. We need to carry people with us to solve a problem that otherwise is going to hang on our neck and drag the economic growth down.
So the ideal 17, 18 years ago, when we were thinking of building a center for advancing this ideal of the American dream, was really we looked at three groups. One, those who believe they've achieved their dream. Two, those that believe they're on their way to that dream. And the third, those that believe they cannot achieve their dream. And this center was primarily focused on the third group, to give you hope in the stories of others that occurs. And I think when you talk about the challenge of youth, this is obviously one of the keys. And in the other room, there was a documentary many, many years ago, almost more than 30 years ago, with Maya Angelou. And she said the same things you've said today, Kristalina. She said she doesn't think you can achieve your dream unless you bring others along with you on that dream. Yep. So this rebalancing that you talk about cannot be the U.S. alone. What roles do you see for China and Europe in this process? You gave us an outline. What policy actions are the most important today?
Yeah. Well, World today is, of course, different from what it was 5 years ago, before the pandemic, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And one thing that I tell my team, I tell our members, is look forward. It would be a big mistake to be nostalgic for the days we lived in and pray. Don't waste your dream for going back. Think about going forward. And there, of course, there are very important pillars of global growth and stability. China is one, the EU is one. And I saw on the map, India is coming up. We have regions of the world like the Gulf, ASEAN countries that are showing a dynamism that we should be talking more about. But going to China, I mean, China is in a place where from top to bottom, from the decision makers to ordinary people, they understand that the growth model they relied on cannot be sustained, that they need to switch to consumption-driven growth model. But doing so is not easy, and it takes time. And when I go to China, actually what impresses me more than the growth numbers, the inflation or disinflation risk, what impresses us more is that we have a whole country of 1.4 billion people that is now seeing their fortunes changing. They were a country that for 4 decades knew only one thing: up, up, up. Growth up, standard of living up, wages up, job opportunities up, entrepreneurship opportunities up. And now they're turning into what I would say a normal country, a country that goes up, goes down. The adjustment, especially of the young people in China, to this normal place for China. You know, other economies have gone on this way. This is not an easy adjustment. And I think, again, more talking about what can and must be done and mobilizing the doing is necessary. And there we have one fixation, and it is get an economic policy in place that reflects today's realities. And again, I want to repeat myself, there is a recognition in China that the export growth model is no more viable, but it is not easy to switch to consumption. In Europe, so Europe is such a wonderful place. In my former job at the World Bank, we wrote a report about Europe in which we classified Europe as a lifestyle superpower. It's wonderful to live in Europe. I remember coming from East Coast, from the World Bank, to be a commissioner, and asking my team to plan the year. So they came up with the calendar, and the calendar had all these red spots. I said, what is this? Oh, Easter vacation, summer vacation, Christmas vacation. So I said, look, where I come from, we actually plan our vacations around work, not work around our vacations. So Europe, this is, if you ask me, what is the biggest challenge for Europe? The biggest challenge for Europe is to get into this reality that they have pressure to spend more on defense. Russia's war in Ukraine has been devastating, with significant consequences on public spending in Europe. They have to create more space for private companies, especially small companies, venture capital to come to grow. And they have to recognize that there would be some sacrifices on the way. They have to adapt to this new reality. But let me say, Europe the biggest thing, the most wonderful thing about Europe is that Europe has this incredible project of integrating 27 economies. They may grow to be more. In parentheses, Europe is dating again the UK, so the divorcee is kind of coming closer. They have a beautiful opportunity to do better. And it is my conviction that Europe can be a competitive force, a driver of growth for them and the rest of the world, but they have to overcome this tradition of, you know, we don't have to spend much on defense, you know, we can take long vacations. This time is kind of over. Sorry, where are my European friends here?
Well,
my family is in Europe, so what I'm saying, I feel it in my heart.
Well, I think anyone that knows you, Kristalina, knows what you're saying is always in your heart. So you spoke about the challenges we have, and obviously China, where they've gone from having 30 million children born a year to 9. At these levels, they're going to lose half their population in this period of time. Dramatic change. And today there's 200 million more children in India than there is in China today. But for more than 2 decades at the Milken Institute, we've been focused on the idea, we've talked about China, we've talked about Germany, we've talked about Europe, we've talked about the United States, but it might not make any difference what we've done if we don't create opportunities in sub-Saharan Africa. So 19 of the 20 countries with the highest birth rate are in sub-Saharan Africa. They're projecting population growth of 1 to 2 billion more people on that part of the world. And I know one of the things you've been focusing in a world of aging societies and very young populations. How should we think about economies for creating jobs for 1 billion to young people? And how can we encourage more sustainable capital flows to these countries?
This is what my friend and colleague Ajay Banga is concentrating the work of the World Bank entirely. How to create jobs for young people in the developing world where population is growing. And of course at the fund we also work on this because it gets into macroeconomic and financial stability for the countries themselves and through spillover to their neighbors and the rest of the world. It is really very simple as an image. We have people here in Africa, in India, although India is also going to see their demographic shifting, but okay, we have people here and we have capital there. Capital is in the north, the people are in the south. How do we build a bridge for capital to go from here to there? And I don't have a silver bullet for Africa. It is hard work. Countries have to make themselves more trustworthy with rule of law, with strong governance, with institutions that bring confidence. But most importantly, and perhaps even more difficult than this, they need to work together. Today, Africa is being put in one big pot in the eyes of many investors. So something wrong goes in one place, say Sudan falls off the cliff, it throws off investor appetite for the whole of Africa. So that I know that institutions in Africa see it, but they have to see it more clearly. They have to work very hard at continental level to get that sense that they help each other and they press each other. It is not anymore viable to have a country in Africa deciding to go for a coup and then destroy the institutions and the neighbors to say, well, that's not good, to, you know, poo, why are you doing it, but not actively engaging to correct it. As long as we can lift up the image of those economies that are doing the right thing. I mean, Africa has countries with 25% plus tax to GDP ratio, with very dynamic entrepreneurial culture. Get this to be dominant, but that requires engaging with others. Not good enough to focus on only on your own country, on your backyard.
So when we think about some of the lessons you've taught us today, when I think about India, India has more children 18 and under than people that live in Europe. Mm-hmm. They have more children 18 and under than live in the United States plus Mexico. And I noticed in your discussion you talked about accelerated growth and significant growth in India. So you've given us a roadmap for the United States, you've given us a roadmap for China, you've given us a roadmap for Europe. What's your roadmap for India?
Well, India, the most impressive thing India has done is policy reforms, tax reform, making it simpler. The digital infrastructure, which is public, it allows everybody to tap in and benefit from it. I think India needs to stay that course of reforming the economy and of course, like everywhere else, make sure that the small companies, the entrepreneurial spirit of startups is given space to flourish. I am very a bit on India because of this boldness with which they do things that others are telling them not possible. For example, digital identity. India, everybody was saying you cannot have everybody with digital ID, this number, this system that you're promoting, it's not going to work. They have proven them wrong, so it's working. And then they use this boldness to build competitiveness on top of it by having the public digital infrastructure that allows digital payments. I mean, it's amazing. You walk in a rural India, nobody's using cash. How did that happen? One of the steps that Prime Minister Modi took was to say, I'm going to suck out small notes, only big notes, and that's it. You cannot have small notes anymore. People were saying, oh, terrible, the economy is going to go down. For a short period of time, there was a bit of slowdown. But the overall impact is digital payments are predominant. They're much, much more acceptable in society. So you have digital ID, public digital infrastructure, no small fiat money anymore in circulation, and all of a sudden payment cost goes down, entrepreneurial capacity shoots up, and the results are seen in the growth trajectory of India.
So one last question before we open it to the floor to ask questions. I gave a talk about 6 years ago on entrepreneurship with some of the leaders in Africa, and 4 million people came to listen to a discussion on entrepreneurs. Nigeria was the largest group. What policies or financial innovations can help broaden access and support these entrepreneurs? What can be done that we can bring access? You talked about capital going from north to south. Mm-hmm. Are there any other last-minute suggestions you would make?
There is this bridge, but there is also the channels, the flows inside the country. Hugely important to make it possible for local bond markets to work. Then you get local savings, fueling growth, and when you put the parameters that favor the small entrepreneur, then you can have a big boost domestically. For far too long, we talked a lot about foreign direct investments and not enough about local investments, local bond markets. And I think this is now rightly changing. And I think that you would see the fund in our engagement with countries working very hard to make it so that domestic savings can flow into entrepreneurial activities with return on the investment domestically.
So let's take a couple questions from our distinguished audience. We have one over here.
Rachel Glenister, President of the Centre for Global Development. So debt and debt service is rising in low, middle and high income countries. I'm interested to hear where you are most concerned and also what you think the prospects are for sustainable improvements on debt rather than some of the short-term fixes that we've seen, for example, in Zambia, which is heralded as a success, but I think is relatively short-term fix.
Excellent question. So when you look at the debt dynamics, in the world, public debt is growing faster in advanced economies, in emerging market economies. Actually, it is going down in low-income countries. But it is going down only because they are so constrained and their ability to tap into markets is so restricted. It is not going down as a positive trend. So when you ask me where I'm most concerned, frankly, I'm very concerned about high debt levels in some advanced economies. Not only because debt is sucking up financial resources and pushing up interest rates also for the private sector, but because we cannot anymore justify the excessive debt levels when the reasons for these debt levels to go up is no more there. As you know, they went up mostly during and after COVID, and because of the cost of living crisis that was triggered by the impact of COVID, but most importantly by Russia's war. So these countries, they have to have the strength to come up with medium-term fiscal consolidation plans and then implement them. We are not asking countries to go chop right away. We are saying, give yourself a couple of years, but then follow that path of fiscal consolidation. For low-income countries, and actually to everybody, we say, good debt management. I mean, for God's sake, look at your maturities. If you can do something to adjust your portfolio, do it. And we are very much in favor of competent and decisive debt management offices. For low-income countries, their problem is really very dramatic because their debt service obligations are sucking away the very limited fiscal space they have for their own people. And there we have two avenues for concrete action. One, we call it the three-pillar approach. Countries that are where debt is sustainable, but they face liquidity problems. So act on three fronts. Act on your domestic fiscal position, act with your partners of borrowing that is well tailored to your needs, and then make sure that you attract more private sector investment. And then we have the restructuring cases. And in restructuring cases, frankly, the biggest problem I see today is just accepting you need to restructure your debt. And there, very often, countries, for good reasons, they say, we worked so hard to have access to markets. You're telling us restructure, meaning we're thrown out of there. But the faster you act, the better. We have created the Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable. It helps us to come up with more comprehensive approach to debt restructuring. We issued in April a rule book for debt restructuring, finally defining steps and timelines. And it really is a matter of using the will to act in a timely manner. You drag your feet, it only gets worse.
So we have time for one more question? Two more questions. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Mary Lovely from the Peterson Institute for International Economics. I want to ask a question about divergence within countries. So in the two largest economies in the world, the United States and China, we have buoyant capital markets, but stagnating labor markets. In the United States, we call this the divergence between Main Street and Wall Street. Isn't this divergence a risk to medium-term growth? I mean, how can countries' forecasted growth be sustained when consumption growth is driven by people at the upper end of the income distribution, while the economies are failing to create jobs for new entrants, for youth, but also for those that are going to be displaced by increasing global fragmentation and the introduction of AI? Thank you.
We as an institution, we have always been advocating for prudent fiscal policy that contributes to lifting up living standards across the board. And we do believe that an economy, a society would do better when people across the board feel included and feel that their voice is heard. Certainly we have seen the distance between the top and the bottom growing. Part of it is not a bad thing. It means that there is innovation that creates very high return on investment, and we don't want this to go away. But part of it, and I have shown it in the graph in the United States, undermining intergenerational equality, that's not good. So societies have to look into this, look into the mirror and say, do I really like what I see? And then there are policy measures that can correct this picture. And then you have people with more capacity to pay higher taxes, to consume more, a virtuous circle that is good for everybody. Just to add one point here, what we have been recommending is to think of incentives for entrepreneurship at all levels. And I want to repeat something I said before, especially SMEs, especially startups, because then you not only get people to be better off, but you increase more of this entrepreneurial potential that drives the economy upward.
Well, let's take one more.
Can I say, sorry, one
Sure.
more thing? And also get people to work longer. We had a very interesting study at the fund. It says that today a 70-year-old has the cognitive capacity of a 53-year-old 2 decades ago. So to those of us that belong to a particular segment, hey, we are smarter, we can work longer.
So let's take one more question.
Do we have 1 more hour? I mean, in short.
The question,
Yeah.
for those that didn't, was a focus on Latin America.
Yeah.
And Kristalina has said it would probably take an hour, but she's going to make it shorter.
So Latin America is a part of the world economy that, on the whole, has been performing below potential for quite some time. And I am always expecting that there would be a spark that would unleash everywhere in Latin America the growth potential that is there. So there are a couple of things that are obvious. One is the world is changing very rapidly. Take advantage of this change. Take advantage of the reshaping of global supply chains to look at what is self-inflicted injury, and there is plenty in quite a number of countries. Get rid of it. There is no tolerance anymore for being kind of slow on the uptake. And 3, put in motion this incredible dynamism that you perform when you dance into your economic activities.
Or on the soccer football field.
Or on the soccer football. I mean, that is, and again, I don't want to sound negative, because of course there is a lot good, and Latin America has been resilient in this world of shock after shock after shock. But I think you can lift up your eyes and say, yeah, we aim higher, we do better.
So, Kristalina, one, thank you for our roadmap. We're sit here in the Hall of Dreams, as you referred to it, and your leadership in the IMF will hopefully make the dreams of billions of people on the planet come true. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you.